Rachael Johns is an English teacher by trade, a mum 24/7, a Diet Coke addict, a cat lover, and chronic arachnophobe. She rarely sleeps and never irons. She is also the best-selling author of a number of romance and women's fiction titles. Jilted was Rachel's first rural romance, and it won the Favourite Australian Contemporary Romance Award in 2012. And I have to read this rather than say it because there are so many awards. The Patterson Girls won the 2016 Romance Writers of Australia Ruby Award, and also the 2015 Australian Book Industry Award for General Fiction. Rachel's latest book is The Work Wives, and her next book is Talk to the Heart, which sounds intriguing in its premise. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you so much for having me on your fabulous new podcast.
Well, thank you for being here because it is a new podcast. We're both taking a risk. Speaking of risks, or maybe not, Talk to the Heart, not out till November this year, but I love the sound of it. Could you tell us about the premise and the twist on the existing tale that you are telling?
Yes, sure. Well, I've had a bit of a tricky time with. I had a bit of a tricky time with writing the past few years, and I just wanted to have fun and not sort of go there again. But I think, particularly if you write in the genre of rural romance, it is hard to be original. I mean, in any, as you know, like in any genre, it's hard to be original. There's no stories that's not untold. But I had the heroine of this book from two other books, and she is not a nice person in the two other books. And one thing which I would recommend to any writers, don't do what I do, and that is don't write villains. I'm learning because now I'm writing a villain in the current book, and I'm like, well, she's got to have a motivation. Why is she like this? I need her to be like this, but why? But I didn't have that for Adeline, who's the character in the first two books, Talk to the Town and Something to Talk About. I just needed, a plot device kind of thing. And I never expected to write her story. But years ago, what happened is I wrote Jilted, my first book again. I did this. You'd think I'd learn from my mistakes, but I am a slow learner. And so I had another character like this in Jilted, and I did end up writing her book because people wanted more of that town, and I literally only had this one character that really I felt could have a story. So I redeemed that character in that book, but I thought, it's been about 10 years since then, but I thought I can't do the same thing again. And so I spent a lot of time thinking, how am I going to make this Adeline person, like literally the only redeemable thing about her in the other books is that she breeds dogs kind of thing, and she likes dogs, but I'm like, how am I going to make her redeemable? Now, this is a slight spoiler for one, but it's not really. It turns out in the other books that her grandmother is a murderer. And this murder happened, obviously, a long time ago. And so there's a ghost in the other two books, and it's her grandmother's the victim. And she doesn't know this. So I thought, well, I've got that. I've got that her grandmother's a murderer, and I've got that she likes dogs. What can I do with it? And how am I going to redeem her? And then I just suddenly one day was in the kitchen, and I thought, I think I just read Thornbirds, which took me a long time, in terms of I hadn't read it before. And then I finally thought, it's a book I have to read. I remember reading your first contemporary women's fiction novel, and it talked about Thornbirds and stuff, but I hadn't read it then. And that was, I thought I should read it. And then I must have been around that time I'd read it, and suddenly I was cooking dinner one day, and I thought, I haven't read many romance novels about nuns. There's probably a reason for that. And then I thought, what if Adeline sort of discovers, she's this horrible person who's kind of been quite a bitch to a lot of people and stuff, because she's kind of got this elevated opinion of herself because of her family and her grandparents in the area. I thought, what if she discovers, she has one last, bad experience with a guy, and then she discovers her grandmother's a murderer, and hopefully I made it a lot more believable. But then she decides, she asks for a sign, and the sign comes that she should join a convent. So I had a lot of fun. But then I suddenly realized, when you said about Sound of Music, that basically what I thought of was a modern day Sound of Music, because Adeline goes to join a convent. She's a bit like Maria in that it's not really obviously it's a romance novel, so it's not going to be, her life thing, but she's trying to be good and work all that sort of stuff. And then she meets this guy who doesn't have lots and lots of kids. And this is when I clicked that, hang on, it's a bit like Sound of Music, when I decided that I would have a guy who fosters delinquent teens. Because I don't know about you, but, I feel like writing a book is like, and I started taking a long time to describe, I'll shut up in a second.
No, don't. It's
But,
all interesting. Please don't shut up.
there's lots of, different different seeds, I kind of think, of writing a book. So I had the Adeline one I thought she's good nun. And then before I'd come up with the nun, I'd already kind of had the hero in my mind. And because she likes dogs, one day I was at the post office and I saw, they sell books there. And I saw a book called Back on Track. And it was about a guy who, helps teenage boys and stuff sort of that are at risk of going off the rails through training dogs and things. And obviously the original idea, often changes, but that was the original seed of inspiration. I thought, well, what if there's a guy in town that, is helping lots of foster kids and delinquent teens, and he fosters them and he uses dogs to help, and that her dog meets their dogs and, kind of goes from there. But that's kind of, then I thought, oh, hang on, he is like the captain in some ways because he has all these kids. Then I realized, unfortunately, research got in the way. You're not allowed to foster more than 3 children, so that threw another spanner in the works. But that's what happens, and you've got to go with it. So then I thought, oh, okay, so I've got kind of a modern day Sound of Music. Instead of having singing nuns, I'm going to have TikToking nuns.
Oh, great.
And but then of course we needed Maria. I'd already had that the hero had a brother, so that it all kind of just, I realized it worked kind of out. And so that became kind of the Uncle Max character. And then I thought, well, I need a Baroness. So I thought the hero can have a friends with benefits at the beginning. Right. Okay. And so that's kind of how it sort of all came about. And it was so much fun to write because I just thought, I do love Sound of Music. I mean, it's not like Sound of Music really at all, apart from that, you could draw those parallels, but it was just something different, and I mean, parts of it are probably ridiculous, but I really realized the last few years of struggling with my creativity and particularly doubt and anxiety, that I do this because I love story. I want to write, because obviously all of us would like to, make some money, but that can't be the main reason, and so I've just really worked on trying to have fun with what I do, and that was kind of that was an effort to do that. Yeah, that's why I did that. Yeah. Well, I hope that answered your question. I don't even know what it was now.
No, well, you did, because it was about talk to the heart. And you mentioned TikTok. You are a whiz at TikTok, so obviously you write from experience.
I am definitely not a whiz, and I was probably like you. I'm guessing. I don't know. I was like, I'm not going anywhere near TikTok. It's enough with Facebook and Instagram. And then about a year and a bit ago, I finally, took the plunge. Probably when Colleen Hoover was like, just going crazy on the charts and stuff, and everyone was saying it's because of TikTok. I mean, I think TikTok is one of those things, the same as all social media. The author is not, it's organic, so I don't put a huge amount of effort in it anymore. I played with it a little bit at the start, but I try every now and then. It's addictive though, and I find I'm trying to write 2 books again this year, so I really don't have the time, because it's addictive. You need to scroll to work out to get the algorithm, train the algorithm and all that sort of stuff, and participate in conversations so that people will back you. But also, coming up with original TikTok ideas. I look at some people, I'm just in awe of what they do. I think it's like a challenge in itself.
Well, I've got to say, I look at yours and think, oh man, she comes up with great stuff. I could never do that.
Oh, well, thank you.
So that's why I'm saying you're a whiz.
It's funny because I think I had some okay ideas in the beginning. Like I did something like Confessions of a Midlist Author, and but I was like, I used all my good stuff before I had anyone following me.
You can always repost. I think the moral of the story is reposting. I don't know. If you don't mind talking about what you mentioned about struggling with your creativity, I'm actually really interested in that, because there'd be people who feel that for themselves, so people who have been writing for a while, who have been published for a while, or people who haven't been published and want to be published. And the key, I guess, is in you saying that you decided to have fun, but that struggle is real a lot of the time. And I would think, particularly for you, with so many books behind you and so many different stories and characters and communities to build in your mind, it must feel crowded up there sometimes, or maybe not, but I would imagine that's part of it.
No, that's a good way of it. Maybe that's what it is, crowded. I think I read a lot about sort of burnout and stuff around the time. As I said, I I'm not quite open about it, and I'm happy to talk to about it, because I think, you know, yeah, we, with social media especially, we see, oh, everyone's doing so well. Everyone's, you know, can write 10,000 words a day and has 50 ideas, you know, and is winning awards and getting TV deals, and it's so easy to go, oh, you know. And so I think that's part of it. Like, I had to realize, just stay in your own lane, kind of, don't worry about what other people are doing, and remember, you know, why you do this. But yeah, I went through 2 books ago, I think it was. It just got hard. It came happening over a while, I'd say, probably a period of a few years. And I don't know if it was, I think maybe it was burnout, maybe trying to do too much. I remember it kind of coincided the beginning, I think, as I said, it probably took about 5 years, when we sold our business. My kids were all at school finally, and I was writing full time. So then I suddenly thought, I was writing 2, you know, romances a year when I had little kids at home and we were at a business. I can do like even more now. And so I stupidly took on 3 books for Harlequin, Mills and Boon, but they were what I tried to do years and years ago when I first sort of, well, not originally first started, but close to first starting. And I'm not the type of writer that finds that it's everyone thinks, oh, you can just write a Mills and Boon, that's easy, you know, just knock it off in the afternoon, there's a formula. But it's such a tight craft, and it's so focused just on the hero and heroine and certain things that I just, it's not me. And so even though there were shorter books, taking that on, I think, really burnt me out and put the pressure. And then, of course, that got behind on what I loved and what I was wanting to do, and that built more pressure on that. And because this did become and is my full-time job, then I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert that says in her book, Big Magic, that you should never let your passions have to, like, never rely on your hobbies or your passions to pay your bills, because it can take the joy out of it. So, you know, I realized something needed to give a couple of years ago. I talked to my doctor about it. I started anxiety medication, and I did speak to someone for a few sessions, and it really helped. But I think it was kind of the permission to go, to take some pressure off and go, look, as I think so many times, we want to get published, right? That's the first thing. We want to finish a book, then you want to get published, but then that's not enough. And then you want to, you know, you keep whatever, when you hit a goal, you suddenly move the goalpost. And I was a qualified teacher. I didn't teach for very long, because then I stupidly had a baby, think it would sleep all day, and I'd go to have on maternity leave. And but I wanted to earn a teacher's living. That's a teacher's wage. That was all I ever wanted to do, and I was doing that with my 2 books a year. But suddenly I thought, well, you know, maybe I want to be more. Maybe I want to be able to, you know, fly first class around, you know, and so I think the desire to be better, yes, but also to be more successful put so much anxiety and stress on me that I forgot why I do this. And now I've really gone back to, well, yeah, I need to pay my bills, but really that's my benchmark. You know, I am happy. I'm lucky that I'm able to do that, and so don't ruin it by wanting more, if that makes sense. And try to be grateful for what I've got, and try and enjoy it a bit more. And so that's, and I read a whole lot more than I was probably. And, you know, if I don't meet word count or something, that's okay. Whereas before I'd be like really hard on myself.
Right.
So yeah, it's probably a podcast in itself.
Well, and it is great to talk about, and I'm happy to talk about it, and glad you're happy to talk about it, because I do think it applies to a lot of people, and particularly when we load up the things we love with the expectation that, yes, it's got to support us, and therefore I have to meet these certain benchmarks, as you were saying, even if it's a word count a day. And there's really no manual for that. You know, it's not like you can go to a course that will say, okay, so when this starts, this is how you do it. But I do have to also applaud the fact that you continue to write books through this. You continue to.
Well, I think that's probably because I had to, literally.
You continue to produce stories that people love. I mean, that's the other thing is to write. You could be sitting in that feeling and half deliver. You know what I mean? Like kind of undercook.
Well, and I probably had the opportunity to do that, because the book that really nearly broke me was Outback Secrets, which came out probably a year and a bit ago now. Time's going too fast. I cut down to 1 book a year, like when I was getting the, the pressure. I could tell that it was getting to me, and I thought, well, I don't want to just be turning out books. I want to be doing this for as long as possible. And I know that then I have to do the best books that I want, because I don't want my readers to start going, well, yeah, she phoned that book in, and that one wasn't very interesting now, and maybe I won't try the next one. I want to keep them. So I knew that I had to. So I started by cutting back to a year, but in some ways that added more pressure, because basically it just halves your income. But then I think that pressure got even worse. And what happened with Outback Secrets is I wrote 35,000 words. This is where I think your head really gets to you. And it can really, it can be, if you let your subconscious work well, it's amazing. But if you let the other side, I suppose, really get to you, it can be so damaging. And I wrote 35,000 words of Outback Secrets. And then I just started actually feeling physically ill every time I thought I had to get up and write. I just thought, it's not working. I can't do this. I've got a deadline in 3 months or whatever. I literally cannot. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so then one day I had a nap instead of sat down and forced myself to write. I said we were on school holidays, and I thought if I just do 500 words a day through school holidays, but it just that was just making me so feeling ill and sick. And so then I had a nap one day, and I was like, you know what? I need to start again.
Right.
And it was terrifying, because I had 35,000 words, and I liked the characters, I liked the words in some ways. I just felt in my gut that it wasn't working. And then I started again with a different heroine, but the same hero, because that was always going to be that hero, because he was from the other book. So I couldn't change him. And then I wrote 35,000 words. So it was 30 the first time, then 35. And then I started feeling that way again. And I realized, and then of course now I'm very close to deadline. And I realized, no, it's just not working. And I know my really close writing friends were saying, it's not the book, it's you. You've got all the elements that you need for a strong romance story. But I just couldn't explain it. But I was like, no, I have to start again. And so then I went back to basics of romance writing, and I chose a really strong, I chose a trope. If anyone reads romance or writes romance, they'll recognize, that word. And I decided I was going to write a fake relationship story, because a friend said that was her favorite type. And I just thought, I'll do that. I'll go even more rural on my heroine, because I think part of the issue was that she wasn't rural, and either was the hero, he was a publican, and I was feeling that wasn't right. But then I basically thought, I just have to make this work. Even if I don't like it, and I forced myself to write it. That book did require a lot of revision. But I did get there in the end. But it was very, very hard work, and it wasn't enjoyable. It's interesting though, I don't know about you, I feel like we're not the best judge of our own work, because that book sold really, really well. Maybe it was the cover, I don't know, but all the reviews, it's like one of my strongest books in terms of reviews and stuff. When people say, oh my gosh, I loved all your books, but that one just, I want to say, were you on drugs? Like,
and also,
so
I don't want to break it to you,
hard.
but a great cover might work for your first book, but you have form now. Like, these books keep selling really, really well, so it was not the cover.
But yeah, it was hard, and so I didn't. I honestly, I remember thinking, if I can't do this, that's it. Right. Like, I'm just going to have to. This is my last ditch attempt. But then I think the funny thing is, the book before, as I said, it had been taking a while. The book before, I get to a stage in every book where I think, this is not just the worst book I've ever written, but this is the worst book anyone has ever written. I don't know what it's about. It's about nothing, and I don't know what the point of it is, and it's all stupid. And I think that used to come to me later in a manuscript, but over the course of me getting more and more anxious, it came a lot earlier. Right. And so I remember the book before that, I got to a section that was really, really hard, and I just thought, I said to my friend, if I can pull this off and it does well, whatever, I'm never going to doubt myself again. And then that was my, testing fate or whatever, because the next book almost broke me. So
right. But it's, look, as I'm fond of saying, writing is not hammocks and scented candles. It is earth and gristle and blood.
Love that.
It's a lot more like dirty and mechanical, I think, in some ways, because sometimes you just have to sit down and get it done, as you do with
I think that people want to think it's nice, don't they? People outside want to think, oh, we just, sit down and just flows out of our fingers, and we would love that. But then I think so many more people would be doing this. It's not for the faint-hearted. Yeah.
Well, and also the fact that, I mean, I tend to feel this, that you're kind of hewing the characters out of your own flesh in a way. It's a weird thing to say, but when you have a physical response as you did to a manuscript and felt in your body that you couldn't go any further, I do think it's because it does feel like you're donating bits of yourself, and there are not necessarily processes to get that back when you're writing at that pace.
True. Yeah, I think like you have to listen to your body, and obviously that was telling me I needed to take a bit of a break. I went off social media for a month as well, which doesn't sound like much, but it did kind of help. And then I just, as I said, I've been a bit more aware of my negative thoughts and stuff now. I can pull myself back and stuff like that. But I did realize, I think there's two different types of writer's block. You know, some people will say writer's block doesn't exist. I think it does, but I don't think it has to be as debilitating. Like it's weird. I feel like now I've come through that Outback Secrets drama. I said to my publisher, actually, I did 10 years before that, and I never felt like a proper author. Right. I almost feel like a proper author now, because I feel like I've been through so much and managed to make it work, that I can almost, I've got to touch some wood here, can almost make anything work now. But I think I've learned from that there's life causes writer's block, and it's not necessarily that, you know, that you're creatively blocked. It's that there's just too much going on in your life, and your emotions are taken elsewhere, and you can't put that energy into the book. And the other thing is, if you're stuck in a book, you've lost your way, and you're trying to force the book to go somewhere it's not. And usually if you just take a step back. So yeah, I learned a lot through this time.
Yeah. Well, and because you've talked about writing romance, I'm interested in the structure of romance is there. It's in some ways simple. It can be freeing because that structure is there. You don't have to come up with a structure, but I'm wondering if for you it has felt constricting, or maybe it's felt both. At the start it might have felt freeing, and then it became a constriction.
Yeah, it's definitely felt both, and it still feels both in lots of ways. Like, people will often ask me at library talks, or a journalist will say, oh, which one do you like best? You know, do you like your rural romance, or do you like your contemporary, you know, general fiction? And I say, honestly, whatever I'm not doing. And that was until I actually really refound the joy, and I have refound the joy now. So, but that was how I felt for many years, because it's like the grass is always greener. I thought, whenever I'm doing a romance, I thought, this is too hard. This, you know, I have to follow this structure, like you say. I know a lot of romance authors hate the word formula. It doesn't bother me. I think, you know, it's basically a structure, and that's the thing, as you said, like, we've got to, and you know, crime comes with a structure or formula, whatever you want to call it as well. If you don't find out who the killer is, or by the end of the book you're annoyed. And that's basically what romance, the structure is. It's a promise to the reader that by the end of the book they're going to get that happy ever after feeling, and the two people that they've met right near the beginning, they know that they're going to get together, but they've gone on that, you know, journey of all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, I know with a romance I've got to have that meet cute. Somehow they're going to meet. So that's kind of, you know, and then I know there's probably going to be a kiss at some stage, probably a sex scene. There's got to be some sort of conflict that's stopping them just madly falling in love. You know, so it is, I would say in some ways it is easier, even though the most hard book I've ever written was Outback Secrets, which was a romance. And I think so on the flip side of that is, you have to, you know, those characters, the characters become very real. They should become real if you're a writer. Like, and so you can't force them to do things that they wouldn't do. And I've, you know, and so that's kind of what was happening. Why I felt in my gut that book wasn't working is those two characters, while they were great, I loved both the characters and things, or both. There was a reason why they would just not pursue their relationship. Like, the conflict was too strong, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I'm like, or there was other things like the timeline. In one of them, they were going to put on a Christmas pantomime, but that takes a reasonable amount of time. Yet I needed their relationship. It's hard to explain, but yeah, no, I was trying to force characters to do what they wouldn't do. So I think that's the problem with romance, in that, yes, you've got a structure and stuff, but each character, or each pair of characters, they throw new sort of hurdles at you, and you have to make them connect. And that's the hard thing, I think, about romance, and to keep it fresh, because as we've said, you know, with a romance, yes, people want to read what I said, but they also don't want to feel like they've read it a million times. They want the feeling that they get from a romance, but you don't want to think, oh, hang on, I read this exact story last week. So that's the pressure for romance. I think it's following that structure, but making the characters fresh and the story fresh enough each time. So, but then on the flip side, when I write a women's fiction, let's just call that now, you know, I can have 2 point of views. I might have 1 point of view character. It might be over the course of 10 years. Not that I don't think I've ever done 10 years, you know, but like the elements can be a lot more fluent. If that, and yes, I mean, we probably all loosely follow some sort of, you know, 3-art stretch or all that kind of stuff. But I feel like it's not as set in stone with, and that, so that's the problem with that. So yeah, but I think again, it's the characters that are key, and you know that can be good and bad, because if you follow them and it's working well, it's great. But if you think something they need to be doing something and it's not working, and what they want to do is not going to work either, that's when it starts, you know, getting really tricky.
Because they do have a life of their own. And I should say, you call your women's fiction life lit, which is great.
Oh, I did for a while, and I don't mind that term. Like, I don't know, I someone actually else came up with it. You know, I know Jackie Arthur, who used to be in publishing industry, and she was the one that came up with me, because she was the publicist for the Patterson Girls. But I don't know. Anyway, I think it might have been the Patterson Girls, and she came up with it because she said, "What's the term for it?" And then we talked about women's fiction, and you know, there's that whole. I think there's 3 things I don't like about women's fiction. One is the sort of belittling sort of element, that it's just women's stuff and it's not that important. The other one is that men do read what we write, you know, maybe not a huge, massive percentage, but there is enough that I've met, you know, plenty, and you get emails from them and things like that. But the main one is that women's fiction doesn't really tell you anything about the story. Whereas if you say I write historical fiction, I write crime fiction, you know, I write romance, you immediately know. So I'm not sure Life Lit ticks that box either. But then Pamela Cook, who I'm sure you know of as well, you know, she actually clipped it to me and she said women's fiction, she thinks is a really empowering term, because it's about, you know, primarily women writers writing for primarily women readers, and it's celebrating the things that, you know, women deal with and find important. And so I quite like that. So I'm not as down on the term now.
Well, we'll use both. Now, one of your particular gifts as a writer, I think, is creating characters who immediately connect with readers. Like every time I've read one of your books, I just feel from the first page I'm there. And it's a lot harder to achieve that than it looks like, because it could look like, oh, you just sat down and started writing this person and they came to you. But in order to make the reader feel that comfortable with a character, you as that character's creator have to know them really well before you start writing. So I'm interested in whether you do put some planning into characters, whether that's, you know, writing notes or doing a graph or whatever it is, or just mentally keeping it with you until you start writing.
Well, I can tell you there's definitely no graphs happening in my life. I can't do spreadsheets. Although the book I'm writing now, I tried to do a spreadsheet at one stage, but then I decided that maybe that spreadsheet told me the pacing and everything wasn't working. So then I threw the spreadsheet and the whole timeline of the book out the window and start again. But I think what I generally do is I will come up, like, I know that there's, it really varies from book to book, because some characters appear like stronger, if that makes it, like they just appear in your mind stronger. Like I'm thinking about the book I'm planning to write next, that sort of premise came rather than the characters. So I'm still trying to work out, you know, who those, I haven't started, but I'm just like thinking in my head, because as I said, I'm making 2 books this year, so picking myself under stupid pressure again. So even though I'm finishing another book, I'm thinking, hang on, I better, you know, what I often do almost every book is I've got actually I think it's in my bedroom, unfortunately, because I was looking at it for this reason. I've got a book called I think it's 16 Master Archetypes, Heroes and Heroines or something. It's quite old, hence why it says hero and heroines, and it's very gendered in the different archetypes, but it's still very useful. And I just kind of, I feel like even if I don't know who a character is or their name or what they do, I've kind of got a general feel of what, like the next book, I know I've got 2 sisters, twin sisters, who are around 50, and I want them to be very different. So I kind of, that's made me go to the archetype book and go, well, what are like almost the polar opposites? And we've got one of the archetypes is the boss, so like a really driven, someone who's always worked hard, professional, that type of person. And then another of the archetypes is the free spirit, kind of a party animal or a comedian. So I usually start with those two things, and I kind of just write as much of the notes of what those type of characters are, and then it kind of just starts me thinking, if that makes sense, and then I forget about it as I write. I'm hopeless with things like what they look like. I don't care really, so that
I don't either. Like I don't describe my characters much. Yeah.
I hate it because I'm like, oh shivers, I should say what they look like, and then I can't think of anything more than, oh, this person's tall and this is short. So I'm not very good at that. So I will sometimes, especially if it's a like rural romance or whatever, I will choose a couple of celebrity type photos. One thing I have found useful is choosing a sort of a theme or a word for each character. And I usually do that before I start. As I think things vary from book to book, but so for this next book, maybe it will just be their archetypes, almost like party girl and career woman. And so that then, but I've had things like uncertain. I'm trying to think. I've taken myself off my last book, but I've had things like carer, nurturing, like lost. So that whenever I'm in that character's point of view, I know this is sort of the main thing that they are at the moment, and it sort of just helps me ground the scene and think, well, if I'm someone who's a party girl, how would I be in this situation? So and then I kind of just go for it and just work out who they are as I go, and that might change as I go, and then I realize something about them and I'll go back and tweak it or fix it.
So do you plan plot before you begin as well? Because again, part of the art of what you do is making the reader feel really comfortable, and the highest compliment I like to pay is your books are easy to read, because that is very hard to achieve. And your books are really easy to read.
I've got oh my gosh, a magnet from the New York Public Library that's, I forgot who, it's a famous author who wrote it, but it said, easy reading is not easy writing. It's very true.
Yeah. Well, it is, because it's that art of making things look simple, and it's that old trope about the duck with the ducks look smooth on top of the water and then the legs are frantically paddling. But I think that is true of easy reading. Yeah,
definitely. So what was the question?
Oh, if you plot much.
Plotting or plotting. Yeah. That's right. No, I always think, it must be easier. Do you plot?
Not too far ahead. Like I have an idea of an emotional arc for the character, where they start and then where they end. But in terms of actual story, I might only plan a few chapters ahead, and even that'll change. But once I've started,
actually, I'm similar to that, I think, now, because I said I did at the Romance Writers Conference last year, I did a workshop that I presented called, I think, I don't know, it was something about plotting. Embraced your inner pantser. That's right. And it was talking about, because there's so many methods out there about plotting and how to do it and that, but there's a very little on how to be a pantser. And I definitely am more of a pantser. I think it's probably one of the reasons why it took me so long. I mean, it took me 15 years to get published, of trying and writing, a lot of books. And I think part of that was because I stupidly at 17 decided I wanted to write a book, but I was not a reader. It's a weird, but I found reading at the same time I found writing, and reading, literally, that really is the best way to learn how to write. And I think people who have been readers forever, or like, finally, I feel like I've been a reader forever, because I have been doing this now for over half my life, not published in that time, but I have, and I've been obsessed with books all that time. I've still got a lot of catching up to do, classics and stuff, hence the Thornbirds. But I think if you read a lot, you kind of just know in your head about plot. And whenever I think too much about plot, like I've had friends, who are saying they're doing the Save the Cat method, or someone sends me a whiteboard of all this, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong, and then I should. But if I start thinking even probably the furthest I can go is what's the setup and the enticing incident kind of thing. If I start thinking, well, what's going to happen at the midpoint, or what's going to happen if the other, as I said, I don't even remember the names, then I start panicking. I've realized, I think, oh, well, that's not going to work because, you know, the story's stupid or whatever. Whereas if I just micro plot kind of as I go, then it doesn't, by the time I get to things I'm worried about, often it doesn't matter anyway, because the story has taken a different direction anyway. So I have really learned, I wish there was a simpler way, because, you know, it can be very stressful, and you can write, like I did in the other book, 65,000 words. But I think plotters could, like, I feel like if I plotted, that could happen as well, because I thought I knew what I was doing, you know, but it just gut didn't. But I have really learned to follow my gut and to trust the magic, because I think there is an element of magic in writing. It's the only area of my life where I'm a bit woo-woo. But like, I honestly think things will happen. You'll put something in and you don't really know why, or if it's going to be a thing. And then it emerges that it becomes quite a thing as you go on, or it just, your subconscious knows more than you if you trust it. But that's hard. It's really hard to do. And I think you end up writing, or I don't know, I end up writing probably longer books than I should, because I ramble a bit, but then I don't want to kill the darlings. So yeah, I do edit, and I have, you know, obviously you have to edit, and I do cut things out. But I sometimes wonder if I was a better plotter, and would I then, you know, not have scenes, you know, or would I? Sometimes those scenes don't make the book, but I would like it if I didn't have to write them in the first place to get there. But I've realized I do. I just have, that's just the way I work.
Yeah, that's your nature. And before you mentioned your gut, the question that was forming in my head was, do you feel it in your body as you're going along when something's not right? Because I feel that as well. I'll get to a point where I'm like, oh no, that is just not right for that character at that point in time. I might intellectually think, oh, I should make them do X, Y, Z. I just think, that's not happening. So yes, it does take time to get to the point where you can trust the gut, but it is extremely powerful.
I think your gut is super powerful. And yeah, I think probably earlier on, I didn't trust it as much. And sometimes I don't want to trust it. Like the book I'm writing now, which comes out next year, I got to 75,000 words again. So luckily I didn't scrap that set, but that's when I realized, as I said, I did this spreadsheet, because I just felt my gut, the timeline wasn't working. I was trying to make it over the course of a whole year. And so I'd started on New Year's Eve, and which meant I felt like I was going to have to finish then, because I'd started then kind of thing. But the scenes weren't, like, I was having to stretch everything out. So it was like, well, what are they going to do in June? I got to May and I had 75,000 words. This book is going to be ridiculously long. And what there's nothing for them to do in June. I was starting, and then I suddenly thought, you know what? It's the structure, the timeline is not working. I knew in my gut, but I stupidly thought, I'm just going to toss a coin, you know, and I'll start again, because it's hard work. Rewriting, you know, we know is really hard work. And I thought, well, I'm at 75,000 words. If I keep going, you know, I'll have a draft in, you know, another month or so. But if I stop, I'm basically starting again. So I tossed the coin and said, if it's heads or whatever, tails, I'll start again. And if not, I'll keep going. And it said to start again. I didn't like that idea. So I was like, best of three. But it still said to start again. And I knew in my gut that I should start again. But I was like, oh. Anyway, I did. I ended up saving a whole load of stuff, but I just changed it so it started Valentine's Day. It was a really simple save, because then I didn't have to worry about the whole year. I had to change a few things at the beginning, because Valentine's Day was slightly different to New Year's Eve and different. But it was easier to change than I thought. And then actually a lot of things, the pacing just fell into place a lot more, because I didn't have to think, well, really, I better spread it out a bit. So it was a simple change, but it did take another 3 or so weeks to rewrite and feed it all back together. But I know that was worth doing. The other thing I did with that book is I'd put too many subplots in, because, again, I had a whole year. So I thought, I'll just have all, you know, the heroine or the main character had like 4 colleagues who she's good friends with. I thought, we'll give them each, you know, something going on. And I've had this surrogacy thing in there for absolutely no reason. Like, and sometimes, as we said, that's the gut you got to follow. Maybe that was, but that I knew by the time I got to 75,000 words, I was forcing this. The other plot lines sort of meant something, but this one just felt wrong. But I really liked the scene where the character's best friend tells her she's going to be a surrogate for their other friend. Like, I just loved it. And so that's literally why I wanted to keep it. And so I did keep it for a while in my rewritten, and then I still felt in my gut, so I scrapped it completely. So you have to, your gut does know. And I think if you're stuck at all, or you're starting to feel worried and anxious, it's usually because something's wrong. And, you know, you have to follow it.
Yeah. But still, you could save that seed and use it in something else, and, you know, just never know.
Yeah, true. You never know. I think that's the other thing. I don't know if you've ever had this, like a secondary character kind of takes over a bit, and I really liked the friend, and I thought, oh, well, if I seed in this, then she could be the next book. But I was like, no, this is not working for this book. So, you know,
she could still be the next book, right?
That.
Like, because
maybe, yeah.
Oh, I once had a character barge in and demand a point of view. She's extremely bossy. I wasn't going to give her one, but there she was. I thought, okay, every time I write you, you're taking over. So that's how it goes.
And did you give her the character? Which book was that?
This was a Bellbird River Country Choir. It's a character called Gabrielle, who's the cousin of someone who I thought, okay, Victoria gets the point of view. Gabrielle's just the cousin. No, she was very bossy. Just thought,
so
okay,
funny.
I can't. This is the way it is.
And I mean, anyone who doesn't write will think we sound crazy saying that, because they're like, well, it's your choice. You're the writer. You can do what you like, but it doesn't. You know, if you do try to do that, it will come across on the page. You've got to go with it sometimes. Yeah.
Well, yesterday,
that's the magic.
Even just yesterday, I was writing the first chapter of a new manuscript, and the first chapter this character has with a point of view. I planned her. I thought I knew everything about her. Started writing, and all this other stuff came out. I thought, who is this?
Yeah.
I don't recognize anything.
And that's amazing. Like, I love that. You know, it's frustrating sometimes, but at the same time, it's exciting, because then, you know, I feel like it's on the right track.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, I could actually have you talking for hours about writing, because this is all fascinating.
I could talk to you for hours about writing as well.
We may
I
have
want
to
to pick your brain.
But I will get to some more general questions for other writers who may be watching, and I'm just trying to do like a standard structure here. This is my method. Well, I'm just going to stick with it. Do you have any tips for someone who's wanting to start writing, or has started, they're not quite sure if they should keep going? I imagine reading is a big tip, because you've already mentioned that, but is there anything else?
Definitely reading. I will quickly say something about the reading first. I think I often felt when I was starting to write, and, you know, I thought I was pursuing it seriously, I'd feel guilty in my spare time, or the time that I allocated for writing. I'd feel guilty if I wasn't, you know, adding words and actually writing. Whereas reading is very inspiring, and you learn a lot. So if you're not feeling it, sometimes don't force yourself. Like, as I said, I lost the joy for a while, and I really think that, you know, that's super important. If you work out, I'd go right back to say, work out why you're doing it. And if you're doing it because you love story and stuff, then don't lose the fun. I actually say to some aspiring writers, people have come up to me and said, oh, you know, I've written a couple of manuscripts and I've sent one out, and I got a rejection from, you know, they named one publisher or something, and they said, oh, it's really hard, like, maybe I should give up. And I think they're hoping I will say, no, don't give up. If you keep going, you know, you'll make it eventually. But I've started saying, yeah, I think you should give up. Not just because, Sophie, we need people to buy our book, so we don't need competition. That's not why. The reason is because I really think, like, I thought I was about to give up just before I got published. And I don't know whether I would have actually been able to give up, because I do think writing is, you know, it's like you catch a bug. I've got voices in my head. Half the time they're not the useful voices, or not but it's always kind of, you know, and you'd be thinking, whether I can make a story out of something, I'll often think, oh, that article would make a good story. I don't know how to make it a good story, but that's how you kind of think. Or people say stuff and you're thinking, oh, that's going in a book. So I don't know whether I could have given up. And I really think, if you're having any doubts, try to give up, because, hey, it's much better if you can just read books and enjoy your life. You know, it is a hard, as we've said, it can be, there's other ways to earn money if that's why you're doing it. So if you're feeling pressure and starting to hate it, I would say try and give up. And then if you can't, you'll realize that this is what you're supposed to do. If you can't, then yeah, you have to just keep at it. And I would say find your people. join an organisation. For me, that was the Romance Writers of Australia that really turned my writing around. I, found out people that were serious about writing for a career, and also I met publishers and agents through Romance Writers of Australia, and I started learning things. I did a writing degree at uni, which is a total waste of time. I started learning things through other authors, doing events, and did workshops. That's how I started learning. So I do think those sort of craft things are useful. I'm continually wanting to learn, but I sort of go through swings and roundabouts where I think, I have 50 million craft books behind here. Another one came today, How to Write a Page Turner. Have I read half of them? I haven't read half of them. But I'm always thinking it's a bit like magazines, it says you can lose 7 kilos in 7 days or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's what I can do. But it's always just exercise more, eat less, right? Writing a book, there is no secret. You just have to do it. And I think you can learn about, it's important. I love listening to how people do it and learning stuff. But at the same time, sometimes you've got to just switch off that, because learning too much can almost kill your voice, if that makes sense. So I think it is a matter of, I don't know, some writer has said that, it's like an apprenticeship, you're putting your time in. So I would say you've just got to put the time in, meet people, keep doing it, read lots, don't give up. But also, don't follow all the rules necessarily. You've got to really find your voice. But my biggest piece of advice, is don't rush. Right. Because I think these days, like, I know many people who are really well self-published, are doing a great job. Some of them, that was their first, publication. Others have, lost contracts or changed genres, and, they've decided that, well, they've had experience in the publishing industry, they can do it themselves, and they're doing really a good job. But I do think, so I've got nothing against independent publishing. For me, I want to focus on the writing, so it's not something I necessarily want to do. I'm not saying I'll never do it, because, but I think so many people, it's in some ways it's easy now to do that. Yes, it's hard if you're doing it properly and all that, but you can just write something tonight and put it on Amazon. And I think so many people just get that one rejection and think, well, the publisher doesn't know what they're talking about, I'm going to put my book out there. And that's too easy these days. Whereas, we had to really go through hard yards of writing and getting rejections and learning from that and just keep going. And so I just think, I guess, what you want in the long term. Do you want to make a sustainable career of this? So if so, maybe you have to listen to some of the feedback. But I mean, you work in publishing, or I don't still do, that there's an element of luck too. And so maybe you're getting rejection, but it's not the book, but maybe it is. And probably I'm thinking half the time when you're a new writer, it probably is the book. And you could probably put that one aside, write something else, just keep learning and going. Because I do think people just rush to get published now because it's too easy, whereas I didn't have that option, and I'm kind of glad.
Yeah, the planets definitely have to align. It has to be the right book at the right time with the right publisher. Although I am still laughing internally at you, Rachael Johns, holding up a book saying How to Write a Page Turner when all of your books are page turners.
Oh, well, thank you.
But also, just to go back to something you said about the Romance Writers of Australia, that is a professional development organisation. For anyone who doesn't know and might think, oh, it's just a lot of people sitting around talking about romance. Yes, they're talking about romance novels, but there is so much professional development and so many professional writers who are members that it's.
And I would say we've got crime writers. There's people who are writing general fiction too. I think a lot of people, when you say romance, they think, oh, you must be writing either 50 Shades of Grey or you're writing for Mills and Boon. And yes, we have people who write for Mills and Boon and do very well with it. We also have people who write in the genres of 50 Shades of Grey, but then we've got a whole load, like that's not just what there is, and there's so many opportunities. And I also think craft is the same across most. I mean, obviously there's little things that are different, but writing a page turner is the same, but so is the business in a lot of ways, social media, the networking. And so it is just a really professional organization. I'd been in a number of smaller writing organizations before then, and there was, and there's more now though. I meant to say that too, in terms of when I started in 2006, I joined RWA. There wasn't a whole load of courses out there, and the internet was so young as well. Now you've got
In the spirit of that, I'll ask you one last question, which is, what is the best writing advice you've been given?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna look on my wall because I've got lots of little trying to think. I should have said that. It's I wouldn't know if I don't think I've actually been given this advice personally, but I love podcasts. I was very excited when you told me you were starting a podcast, and I collect like the things that people have said that I've heard, and I think I was looking, this is my favorite bit of advice that I've got on my wall. It's from Jane Green. And it says, take care of the characters and they will tell their own stories. So I do really like that. And then the whole other advice is everything you write is an opportunity to deepen the story. So, it all should matter. That's from Lucy Score. But yeah, I think this, I can't think of anyone particularly telling me one thing. Actually, no, I will. I can tell you. This is not necessarily writing advice, but this is business advice, or it's writing life advice, if that makes sense. And that was Julia Quinn of Bridgerton fame. She came to the Romance Writers Conference in Fremantle in 2013. Before, she was hugely, massively, she was successful, but not the realm of when Bridgerton went TV. And she said, you can never hurt your own career by helping someone else. Because the only thing you're going to do to hurt your career is write a bad book or be a bad, behave badly. And people, that she said, people that read your books and my books, they don't just read one author. They read multiple authors. And I want them, while I'm writing my book, and my book comes out, say, in January, and yours comes out in August, I'd rather they read your book than start reading fantasy or go watch Netflix, because then maybe by the time my book comes around, they're still reading our genre. You know what I mean? But yeah, I just thought that, that's a whole, I forgot about that for a while, probably, in terms of, not that I wasn't helping people or whatever, but I was thinking, it's so easy to compare yourself in that, but really people read more than one author. And so the best thing you can do is just try and write the best book you can and not worry about what anybody else is doing.
Well, you have helped a lot of people, I think, by what you've said on this podcast, because it has been so interesting. I really could talk to you for another 10 hours about everything but that's been so generous of you, so helpful, so interesting. And I will put a link to your website in the show notes so that people can find your books. And I'm looking forward to Talk to the Heart when it comes out.
Excellent. I'll make sure you get a copy.
and also whatever you're writing for next year. So Rachael Johns, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.